Hi, it's Julie Hornock with United in Autism. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have Cristina Busu here.
Hi.
We're so glad you joined us. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share with us. I've known Cristina for a really, really long time. She worked with my daughter Lizzie for about 10 years, you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
About so.
A really, really long time. And when I met her, why I wanted to bring her to you today is she does some unique things that I don't see everyone doing, and they made a gigantic difference in my daughter's life. And so I wanted her to share all these things with you so that you can learn and maybe add them into your own programming. And so when Lizzie was diagnosed, my daughter Lizzie was diagnosed at 2 years old, and I had it in my head that she was going to be fine by the time she was 4. And 4 came around, and we had done straight ABA, and she had a lot of language, and she had a lot of skills, and she had the ability to listen and to learn, but she couldn't use any of those skills to play with me or to interact with another person. And so as a mom, that was kind of my freak out moment where I panicked and I realized I still did not have a connection with my child. And so I found Cristina, and from the moment she was on the scene, I just knew she had something that was going to help my daughter. And when she started working with us, she added in some things to the ABA that otherwise we didn't have. And she added in things like play and the social component. And so we're going to talk about both of those components today and where it was at. So Lizzie has a blog that I started whenever she started doing well, and I realized, okay, I'm gonna be okay, and it's a video blog, so I'm gonna put that at the end. I'm gonna put the blog in the comments so that you can go to this, because a lot of the things we talk about today, you'll be able to actually see in motion with Lizzie when she was young, like 10 years ago. So Cristina worked with her for like 10 whole years. So
yeah, it's been a while.
You're one of my saviors.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I know I've told you this constantly, but if I hadn't found you, I don't know if we'd be where we are today with her doing as well as she is today. So
I'm very proud of her.
I am too. I feel like she's the best version of herself.
I agree.
She has this ability to think for herself and to have her own interests, and she didn't have that. So tell me, I guess everyone, a little bit when you met Lizzie, what she was like.
Well, my first interaction with Lizzie was when I first met you, and I think we did a working interview, although you didn't call it that. And she was playing with, I think it was Legos or blocks, something that required her to kind of build things up. And like any activity, it can be used to do it by yourself, but when somebody joins you, you're supposed to at least acknowledge them, even if you don't want them to play with you.
The typical child, but acknowledge.
Right, and Lizzie had a lot of language based on what you were saying. So I was expecting either for her to say, I don't want you to play with me, or just say, I don't want to play with this anymore.
Yeah.
But what really surprised me a little bit based on, the interview with you before that was that she didn't even acknowledge me. So she was just sitting there and building with her little Legos. I think were the big ones, I remember it. And then I kept trying, to kind of interfere, and because she didn't completely ignore me. The entire time I was there, she completely ignored me. And then so I kept kind of trying to, play with her in a very playful way, and she kept like shutting me down and pushing me away. She still, at no point in time in that, I think it was about 10-minute interaction, not once she looked at me. Not once she acknowledged my presence as a person, but she kept pushing my hands away.
Yeah, like you were just an annoyance to her.
I was an annoyance, yes. But I wasn't a person. She would have done the same thing to, like if you threw a ball at her, Yeah. So that was my first kind of impression of Lizzie. And so that's when I knew we definitely have a lot of work to do here.
Yeah.
Because if she does have all that language that you reported she had, she wasn't using it. It was all
not using it for interaction, using it only to get what she wanted, or because we were giving her a reward that was separate.
So it wasn't functional at all.
Right.
And we do see this a lot with a lot of our clients that gain all these skills, but when it comes to the point of them using those skills in a functional situation or for anything else but getting their needs met, they're completely gone.
Yeah, and it doesn't transfer over to real life. And that was the thing where I had that panicky moment as a mom, like, oh, great, we have this, but we need it to transfer into her relationships, into the people she loves, and even into the school environment, and eventually into peers.
Well, and in all honesty, if she didn't acknowledge another person, she wasn't going to transfer anything to anything else. So, that is actually the biggest yet the hardest piece to get when you work with a kiddo on the spectrum, because interacting with people is not motivating for them.
Right.
And that's where, a big part of our program puts a lot of emphasis on that aspect.
Yeah. Well, and I have to tell everyone today that Lizzie is highly motivated by all things social. So the things that you did with her worked, and they made her not only, it is her reward. She loves it. Everything she does, she wants people involved. If she's ever upset about something, it's that she doesn't feel like she has the mesh of friendships that she wants. And so it's all about social now. And so how do you start with a kid that is like Lizzie, that has skills but doesn't know how to use them? I mean, how do you start that bridge?
Well, I mean, you have to start with that interaction and engagement.
Okay.
Because if you can't build that into your program, they're going to gain all those skills, because to some degree, those are all skills that can be taught. Any good ABA provider or any good teacher can teach your child anything. The trick is to teach them to engage with other people and to maintain that engagement and to actually build in that pleasure that we all have with interacting with people. So that is the key there. And the way we work on that is not allowing the kids to be on their own. Okay. And I know that sounds, difficult, because it is.
It's very difficult.
But for that to be accomplished, you can't allow a kiddo to go be by themselves in a corner as part of their reward or as part of their break. You can't allow a kiddo to just walk away from people once they've done a certain job for whatever task, whatever it is. And it's a model that is very difficult to overcome because it's used everywhere, including in schools.
Right.
Every time I go into a school, kids work for 10 minutes and then they get a break away from other people for 10 minutes. And it's not supposed to be that way. When you and I have a hard day, when we work, right? You go home and you need about, let's say, we all need some degree of short mental break from people. Yeah. And you take your 10 minutes or your 15 minutes or an hour, whatever that may be for you. But after a certain amount of time, you crave that social interaction. Right. You either text a friend or you call a husband or whatever. You feel the need to engage with other people, and that's how we teach these kids. We can't let them just be by themselves. We have to work constantly on that engagement and that interaction, and it starts with just not letting them be alone.
Well, and I remember, tell me if I'm wrong, but I remember with Lizzie, I mean, we started and we were looking for a 2-second engagement. She didn't have the ability to engage for even a second. And so we started with that, but then that 2-second engagement, and I remember we would try and engage, get a short stint. But then the next time we try and engage, we get a longer stint. And then it grew from there where it was, and we started with gross motor play because that was all we could do.
A lot of times, you have to start with a play that does not involve any other materials, because they don't have to share that attention between you and some extra prop. Okay. So it just depends on each kiddo, but generally speaking, that toy is going to be more meaningful to them than you are ever going to be if they're in that phase of the programming. And they would rather pick that toy to stim off of or whatever over a person. So that's where we just start with those simple and call them that. They're baby games.
Well, and I remember it was heartbreaking to me because she was 4 years old, and we took all her toys and we put them away, and we played peekaboo. And like literally we played peekaboo for weeks. Or it was a form of peekaboo behind a couch, or, you know, it was different than just this kind of peekaboo, but it was, you know, we would get a tunnel and we played peekaboo in the tunnel. We would jump on the trampoline and do that. And it was all gross motor and all, but it was things that I was also able to play with my child that was not even 6 months old.
Yeah,
and it was like doing it with both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you move from there once you get that connection, that eye contact, and you know, that little piece of engagement, and then you can slowly add in objects. I remember with Lizzie was a lot of bubbles.
Yeah.
A lot of
we did do a lot of bubbles.
silly string was all over your ceilings.
You're right. It so was.
And I'm still shocked to this day that you allowed that in your house.
I allowed anything that
I know.
allowed that you had engagement.
And then remember how many soups we made?
Oh yeah, we would just take different things, and it was dumping things in a bowl. And lots of I hear this all the time that kids like to dump stuff in, and we just one of the hardest things when we got to this stage was letting go of messes. Like I had to be like, mess is life. Like we're just gonna make messes in this stage, and then also just having to really go back to that early play stage and let go any kind of idea of the activity being right, because there's no right soup. You know, you think, oh, we're going to put alphabet soup. No, it's like, you know, doll soup and whatever she wanted to do.
It was
because
garlic soup and
it was disgusting.
And it was just the grossest.
Yeah, but it was
thing
all
ever.
about like her looking at me and
getting that back and forth for as long as you could maintain it.
Yeah.
Before she kind of checked out.
Yeah, and then she would check out, and
She would initially,
and then we'd pull her back in.
Yeah.
And but the most beautiful thing was like very early in, we had only been doing this maybe a week or two, and I got that first interaction with her, and
That was meaningful interaction.
where it was, she looked at me and we were connecting. It was so different than anything we had ever done before, and I knew, I was like, oh, we're on the right track, because I felt her back with me, and for years she had just been gone, and it was really hard to try and get her attention and have nothing, and only does she need me when she needs food, you know. But as a mom, it was just like, oh, I got my kid back. And so it was for 1 second, but then it grew and grew and grew.
Yeah.
So first we did the fine motor, and we worked with anything without props, and then we added in easy props that didn't have any other meaning.
Right.
And then we started, once she was able to do that for quite a long time, like, what do you think, maybe 30 minutes?
It was 30 minutes, yeah.
Yeah.
About 30 minutes.
Then we started to add in play, so this is what floored me, is that when we did bring the dollhouse out, and I would say this was probably 2 years later, maybe. I mean, this is maybe a year.
No, it was about a year.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay. She didn't know how to play with the dollhouse. She didn't know how to play with anything.
Well, she had what we call, you know, isolated play, where she knew what to do with them. And she could do a lot of things within the dollhouse, as long as you would let her follow a certain script.
Oh, like from Dora, or like a movie, or
right, or what she's learned previously, you know, in her program. So if you would say, "Show me sleeping," she would do "Show me sleeping," and she would do it. But it was very flat. There was no initially before we started, you know, this other program. There was just no connection. Yeah. And I do remember you had a video and you showed it to me. And you know, a lot of the times.
I was so proud of it too. I think I was like, "Oh, look, she can play," and you're like, "Oh, well, not really."
It's not, to me. If you look at the kids playing, it just has so many components. But the basic ones are: do I know what to do with this toy? Mm-hmm. Do I enjoy doing stuff with this toy? And then you can't have play without having those two basic big links, if you want. And so they have to be together. She knew what to do with the toy. She had no joy, and she had no ability to let other people in her play,
right?
Which was our biggest challenge once we moved through, you know, the gross motor play and the prop play and all that more, you know, kind of lower level play. Then she would allow me to be next to her. she wouldn't acknowledge me still.
Mm-hmm.
And she would actually kind of turn away from me because she knew I was about to mess part play up.
She knew.
And then there was just no back and forth. There was absolutely no interaction. There was no joy. There was nothing.
Yeah, and that's the saddest thing
indicative of play.
There's no enjoyment out of play. And I it's hard when you see your kid and then you realize, oh, she hasn't been enjoying herself all of this time. I thought she was, but she wasn't. And so then how do you start teaching that? Because you did, and we have videos of kind of the before and after, and they're just 4 months apart, I remember, and on that blog spot.
So, you know, I mean, there's so many things that we have to kind of fight through with play, depending on the kiddo. You know, you have to work through building those skills that you have to have, which she had that, building that engagement, and then, you know, that acknowledgement of the other person. Lizzie kind of was at the point where she was acknowledging me. She was running away from me, but she was acknowledging me. Now she's like, I don't want to play with you, which was better than what she did before.
Right.
The reason she didn't want to play with me was because she knew I was going to change her play up, because I wasn't going to just sit there and watch her do her script and just do nothing about it, because that's not how kids play. So she knew me better than that, but that's what we had to work on a lot with Lizzie, is that rigidity of play,
yes,
and the lack of flexibility in letting people kind of come in. Because a peer, when they join your play, they'd be like, oh, cool, you have a horse. I'm going to do this with my cow, whatever they have in their hand. And Lizzie was like, no, you're not.
Yeah, I got the plan and we're sticking to
This is my plan. The cow goes there. You can't touch it. You can sit there and watch it, but you can't interact with me at all.
Or you can't change up.
You can't change
maybe sometimes you can do exactly what they're doing if they give you a part, but then if you come in with any ideas, that's
right.
it.
Right.
And I remember the play teaching was, I remember it teaching, working on that rigidity, like we worked on that for years, where we were changing, you were coming in, changing things in her play, but what was so beautiful about it was that it transferred over into life and made her less rigid in her own life. And so I remember one time specifically, and I do have this, I don't have a video of it, but I think I talked about it on that blog, but during lunchtime, they would move the trash cans and she would melt down in the middle of lunch. So I don't know what the problem was with this. So there was trash cans, move them, melt down. Well, that I told you about it, and then we worked on it for about a week, where in play, we took the trash cans and we had them in play and we moved them and she melted down. But then it's like she slowly got used to the idea, and then she wasn't, she let go and she didn't have trouble with it. It transferred completely over into real life.
Well, and that brings me to the biggest point that I want to make today is I get this question a lot, why work on play? Kids don't play after a certain age, so why waste time building these skills when they're not going to use them later? And it's like, I can't emphasize enough how wrong that statement is.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Because it may look like they're not using that later in life, but these little play scenes, like the schoolhouse and the dollhouse and the zoo and whatever set you may have, are actually the slower version of a real life situation.
Yeah.
And that's where you can have kids practice different skills as far as, what do I do at the zoo? How do I behave when somebody approaches me? Anything that you want to work as far as flexibility is concerned. So it's like there cannot be a better avenue to practice these lifelong skills they're going to use everywhere else than in these little play sets. And it's like, think about them looking from above at something that they're just going to hit them later, and learning how to practice those situations, those interactions, the reciprocal skills that they're going to have to practice everywhere else. If we have the opportunity to teach them these skills that typical kids learn in the same way, you can't miss that opportunity because you're not getting it back.
Well, and in the typical world as adults, we might call it role playing. Like if you have a job interview, you might come to me and we might kind of play it out. Right. It's the same thing, and it's being in a structured environment where the consequences aren't big.
Right.
And I think that's so important to. It doesn't matter how old. It doesn't matter if they're an adult. You can still learn those skills and it feels weird because these are little kids' toys, and you want them to be doing adult stuff, but it's teaching those skills no matter where they're at.
Exactly. And it's just teaching them you know, if you're at the zoo and somebody comes to you and says, you know, I want you to come to my car. You can teach them all those responses in a set that is very easy for them to remember, and just kind of build on those social statements and reciprocity of language and reciprocity of interaction by changing it up all the time.
Well, and it comes with their need to see things. They're seeing it played out before their eyes, and then they're able to take it into the real world.
Right, yeah.
And I know for Lizzie, it's always been true. And like now we're to the place where we can just talk through stuff. But before we always, and it does help. Sometimes if there's something really hard, we still will put it down on paper. I remember we've done that recently. So just going through that with the play. There was another thing that I really felt like the play taught, and I was going to look at my notes because I was forgetting, but original thought. So I felt like when I looked back at all of our videos, one thing we worked on a whole lot was she wanted to do what she knew. And I see this all the time with kids with autism. They want to come up to you, like if you're the person that, you know, we only do trampoline, they want to do the exact same thing they know. They want to engage with you. They don't know how to go outside of what they already know.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit of how you could teach original thought through play.
Well, again, you know, that's giving you the opportunity to kind of set up a million situations for kids to respond in so many different ways. And, you know, rigidity of responses is one of the biggest things.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think we do have a video on your blog where, you know, Lizzie would just not accept at all my idea for the play. So you just got to keep exposing them to it. And I remember it took about 40 minutes for her to kind of get through that. I don't think it's all on the video.
Probably not, but yeah.
She wanted me to be this mom. And I didn't
want to be that mom. Yeah, I remember that.
I wanted to be a different mom. And then she goes, no, that's not my mommy. And I'm like, but I want to be your mommy, because that's what typical peers would do. If you don't agree with them, they will walk away. They will not sit there like I did, because I had a goal. But they will just walk away. If you don't accept anybody's ideas, you're not going to be successful. Yeah. You're just not. But I remember, so eventually it's just exposure and kind of just, call it nagging if you want. It kind of resembles that a little bit when you're like, but I want to be this. And then she's like, no. And it's a complete meltdown, and just kind of patiently encourage her, and you gotta wait her through.
Yeah. I remember a lot of waiting it out and waiting it through and being like, it's okay, you can deal with this, and just staying by her side and saying, it's okay, and learning how to do that. Okay, I just learned that in my home and not out in the middle of the street when it's impossible to just wait it out. In a dangerous situation where it's impossible to wait it out.
Right, and that's another reason why play is so important, because you can act out all those situations that you don't want to, you don't want to let her loose in the middle of the street if she's a runner.
Yeah.
You want to kind of practice those things. But, so definitely we worked a lot on her coming up with new ideas based on not scripted statements, because that was, our kiddos are so great at memorizing things. So they memorize the statements that, to some degree they're okay.
And they can apply them too. Like,
they can apply them too, but sometimes they have to pay attention to the context. And if they don't, then their statements are kind of like, out of context and not make any sense. And that was kind of hard for Lizzie. I remember, she just wanted to say her thing and be done with me and kind of just move along, lady, move along.
It's amazing she loves you so much today.
But so, it's just a lot of practicing and waiting them out and just kind of exposing them to those ideas until they finally tolerate them. But the thing that I want to kind of emphasize, it was a process for Lizzie. We didn't go from zero engagement and zero flexibility to the beautiful person she is today overnight.
It was years.
It was years of work.
And the thing I want to share with everyone is just, I want to give you things to bring up with your ABA provider to maybe start bringing them in. Start bringing up these questions of how can we bring it in play? How can we work on the rigidity through play? So that they know they can take these tools and they can use them within what they have set up. And I think that sometimes as parents we don't know to ask these things, and we don't know that it's possible, and we don't know how to work on the rigidity, and the person that is in charge of our program is not necessarily doing that. And I want people to bring it up and to know. And the other thing I wanted to say about the original thought is I remember there was, and this video is on there too, but we brought in some peers, and I want to talk about social stuff because I also, another panic moment for me when she was about 4 is I realized with girls, like boys, when they're adults, they do activities. They go bowling, they golf, and you don't even have to be looking each other in the eye, but girls, we go out to eat and we talk, and that's all we do. And I just feared for her as a girl. I knew she had to be able to socialize. I knew she had to be able to have a conversation and go deep and sit and do nothing else but that. So I want to talk about that social scene in a second, but you had a thing you used to do, and you would sit her with her friends, and you had an animal, and you pull out the animal, and Lizzie would have to come up with, you'd have to guess the animal, and Lizzie would have to come up with a question for you, and it was so hard because it was like, what color is it, or what, and that was a way you worked on original thought, was she couldn't do any of the things her friends were doing, and sometimes we'd sit and we'd wait a whole minute for her to answer, but she would get it. And so I think sometimes when we think our kids don't have that ability of original thought, they have it. It just is taking so much longer to process.
Yeah.
And waiting, being willing for our kids to wait, like a minute for them to answer. Yeah. And remind them of the question if they need it or whatever. But anyway, I wanted to throw that out there for what it's worth. So we've done this. We're working on play. Now we're hitting social skills, because that's like, I remember inviting friends over, and she'd be happy to have them over. And the minute they'd walk in the door, she would not know what to do with them. Mm-hmm. It was like, okay, and now I'm going to just sit here because I don't know what to do. And so kind of give us a little bit from, I know it's really hard because it's so complex, but what are some things, maybe some things they can work with peers on? Like if someone's having a play date and they're trying to facilitate it themselves as a mom, which is really hard, but...
Well, the first thing I want to tell people is don't be disappointed if the social skills don't come in. I know there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and one of them is that if you teach kids language, the social is just going to pop up.
Yeah, no, that all has to be.
And that is one of those biggest mistakes that parents make into believing.
Yeah, we think it in our mind. We just think once they can talk, it all comes into place.
Well, because, language is the first thing you notice, and you think, okay, well, kids who talk, they play. Yeah. Or they interact with other people because that's what's needed. But the social skills are a lot more complex, obviously.
Yeah.
If you don't have a successful interaction just because your child has language, it means that you just have language, basically. So... Right. I know that's disappointing a lot of time for parents, but that just tells you where you need to put your focus for whatever the therapy.
There's a million kids now that have been there before you, and there is things to do. There are things to work on through this social skills when you realize that you're at that place.
So the best, the first thing we teach our clients are, obviously initiations, and we do that in play, and we do that with their friends when we just like go to a room and find a friend and say hi, and it's unbelievable how difficult it is. And then we work on go ask your friend something, and they're just gonna sit there because they can't pick up on the social context, so they just sit there. So we work on look at what they're doing, and then just think about a question you can ask. The one thing that I want to emphasize for people, if you are working on this type of interactions at home, a lot of the times as adults, we feel the need to help our kids, which is a great thing to do. Just keep in mind, when you are trying to help your child work through a social situation and you interfere with that interaction between the peer and your child, that interaction is not what you want it to be if you're in the middle of it.
Right.
It's not an interaction between a peer and a child. It's an interaction between an adult and 2 kids. And that completely changes the dynamic. So the best thing you can do is practice before you send your kid out. And if you have to prompt them, first of all, keep in mind prompting a kiddo within that interaction with a typical peer is not a good idea.
Okay.
So if you send Lizzie, which we did this before, go say hi to Natalie, and she would just go and just didn't do anything. You going there and say, Lizzie, say hi to Natalie. Lizzie, say hi to Natalie. It only makes Lizzie
listen to you,
but also makes Natalie aware of the fact that Lizzie can't do it.
Right.
And we know that they know it, but they also, it's like that puts the peer in a different perspective as well. Yeah. So if Lizzie didn't do it, the best thing to do is like, oh, hey, Natalie, I kind of grab Lizzie for a second and just take her out of the interaction in a different room behind, the building, wherever you can, and say, oh, remember, what are you going to say to Natalie when you see her? And send her back out. You can't, ideally, you shouldn't be prompting those statements and those interactions in front of the peers.
Okay.
Because it changes the dynamic of the interaction. It also changes the way your peer is going to see your child. And it's just like, okay, well, then it transfers to where I'm sure you've heard this before because it happens a lot in schools. Well, Lizzie can't say hi, so I'm going to say hi for her. And peers take over the role of the adult. So then Lizzie still doesn't get to practice. And it's not because peers are being mean. We have the mean ones, but also have the helpful ones.
Right.
And
they're trying to help. They're just the mother hens.
Right. But that's not what we want. So
we want them to actually learn these skills. So this comes up a lot because sometimes we don't have the ability to invite friends over, so social skills are worked on the playground.
Right.
And they're worked into an IEP. And so that's something that needs to be discussed is, okay, give them the tools, send them out, bring them back in, and then go over it right away.
Yeah.
And then send them back out. I like that because it's almost like a home base. Okay, here's your assignment, and we have done that before, and that has
right. And you can depending on the child's level, we gotta talk about this a little bit because I want to mention this. But depending on the child's level, I never put kids in social situations until I know they're ready. For that reason, because I want to be able to say, okay, this is your list. This is what you need to do when you go talk to Natalie. Okay. When you're done, come back here, and then we check it off, and we say, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And she's like, yes or no or whatever, and it's okay. You can try again. It's no big deal. Yeah. It's not like, the end of the world. You can try again tomorrow or another day. But just constant reminder and constant, review of the skills that she's supposed to display is really helpful. I get this question a lot. Why don't you do social skills earlier? Because we don't. We kind of wait to build a certain level of skills, and we did that with Lizzie too. Yeah. I told you specifically, do not get any peers involved until I tell you she's ready. Because social interaction is already difficult. I want to make sure she has all the skills in order to be successful. I want to set her up for successful social interaction because I don't want that to be aversive. If I constantly have to intervene and prompt and remind her she's not doing what she's supposed to do, it's not fun anymore.
Right.
Social interaction is supposed to be fun. So I'd rather her not have it at all than go into a situation like that and not be successful and not want to go back to it.
Yeah, to work on those skills. Because I remember before we were able to work on it, we would have friends over still, but it was more side-by-side play. And we would do something very, I was known as the mom who would allow shaving cream in her home, and because no one else would. And
a lot of sensory play.
We'd do sensory play, but we weren't trying to prompt her or trying to get her to do anything. We were just doing it for the sake of almost pairing friends or peers with fun activities.
Yes.
And be like, okay, oh, well, your friend's coming over? Oh, well, then we'll do all these fun things. And then they start to think in that mode of, okay, peers are fun.
Yeah.
Other people are fun. And
so that's what you want.
And I don't get to do this without them. It's kind of like with your typical kid where you're like, well, you only get junk food when your friends are over. That's kind of in our house. It's the same thing. It's but they're thinking of that. So
so that's the main. We want to set our kids up for success and not failure. And if there's a certain percentage of prompting that needs to be done, and the skills are not learned or displayed with an adult, then we never put kids in social skills or play dates for that matter.
Well, and I would say not enough can't be said about prepping before.
Yeah.
And even in any social situation, even without peers or whatever, but just prepping what's expected. Don't take anything for granted that they know that. Just being like, okay, do you remember that we do this? Or do you remember how we act here?
Right.
And maybe doing it with a social story with pictures. We did that for years and years and years. Every new thing we did was a social story. And it was almost like, it was neat because people always will say, well, how do you get that desire in there? But when I would, like an activity, for example, gymnastics, the first time we went, it was a disaster. She cried the whole time and she tried to get away from the group. And I hadn't done a social story. So I did a social story, and a whole week we went over it with real pictures from the gymnastics group. And I could see as she was able to touch the book and go through it, she started to look forward to the time when she would get to do that. And that was how we kind of instilling that desire. That was one of the ways we did it.
Well, we tend to forget as adults, any kind of social situation is extremely difficult. And not having a plan is also extremely difficult. We tend to forget giving kids plans because we're like, they don't understand it anyways. Why would I? But every time I have a parent tell me, well, they had a super meltdown at this place, I try to give you this analogy. If I would take you and drop you in the middle of a foreign country for 3 hours and just say, go, do stuff. You can't talk, because even if you may have that language, you don't know, it's not easy to use.
Yeah.
You're already anxious because you don't know what's happening to you. And you're just like, probably your anxiety is so high that you don't even know where to start. You're going to melt down.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how they are. They're just like, I don't know this place. It's exactly like a foreign country. They forget everything they learn because their anxiety is so high.
Yeah.
So that's why prepping is important. Also, reminding them the skills they're required to engage in, what's expected in that situation.
Well, and just as typical adults, the more familiar we are with something, the more comfortable we are. And then also, the better we are at something, the more we like it. And I've seen that with myself, with my kid, with my other kids.
Yeah.
So if you help them in advance become good at something, and then they go and they get to succeed, I mean, they're just going to want to do it more.
Yeah.
And so remembering that
the power
too.
of reinforcement.
Yeah, and it is reinforcing itself, and you don't have to bring in the Cheerios or the candy or whatever else you're trying to reinforce with.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you.
Oh,
I'm so grateful. Well, I'm grateful for what you've done in our family, but I'm grateful for the help. I mean, I cannot think of even one time when I've asked you to share something with parents or come to something where you said no. So I'm thankful for what you've done for our community and for all the kids with autism that you come in contact with. And so Cristina is Help Hope Solutions, and she has 3 locations in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So I'm going to put down her link down there. She's just incredible. I love her. She has a wait list for all 3 of her clinics, but I would get on that if you're in this area and you're needing someone that can do that type of thing. And also, I wanted to see, do you mind if people ask questions?
Not at all.
Okay, so they can write questions and I'll tag you on the questions.
Perfect.
So if you have a question for Cristina, I'll tag you on that question and we'll work through that. And please ask questions and I'll answer to anything if I can. So thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to bring some of these issues. We'll have another one next week. We're going to be talking about sensory next week with Betsy. So
awesome.
We appreciate you guys tuning in, and thank you again, Cristina.
You're welcome.